Okay, I'm going to start out with a flower poem, appropriately, I guess. And it's unusual. I think it's another style, new style, but I'm not sure exactly how. It's like an inverted wordsmithing. Hearts and roses. A heart is the center. A rose is the one. Delicate is perfect timing. Some of us ruled by the heart. A flower petal's blood red droplet. The rose is the center, the heart is the one. Delicate is perfect timing. Some of us ruled by the rose. A flower's petals blood red droplet. Coward body, gift of the hand, thorn in the finger, blood on the lip, drenched in the scent, love in both grows. The heart is the center, ruled by the rose. I don't know where that came from, don't ask, but there it is. They did say they'd turn the sound down downstairs, but I don't know. I'm sorry about that. There's always a different bartender, and she's really doing the best she can. So I'm going to wait to sing it. I think I'm just going to read these two pieces. One of them isn't even finished yet, but I kind of know it. It's a story about my dog. But the first one is a little bit more, it's a little darker. So we'll start with that and go with the lightness of dog love in the end. That's not it. Here it is. And this is a true story. This is called Homunculus. There it is again. The sound comes from some great distance, a small, far-off cry. I recall the first time I've heard it. I am about to go to sleep, ready to doze off, and then the cry, so sad, so far away. I think it's coming from the back of an apartment across the air shaft in the distance. It bothers me to think of it. Sometimes I wonder if it's coming from my head. My own mind is playing tricks on me. Yet I hear it again soon at night. I feel satisfied it must be from an apartment across the air shaft, someone else's sadness. Then one day I am waiting in an office to be called in on an important interview. I ponder my answers to possible questions as I sit with my portfolio, wondering if I have the right samples with me to show, if they will be impressed. It's so quiet. The only sound is coming from the air vents, a soft, snoring, slowing sound. Then off in the distance I hear that cry. I realize now it's not coming from anywhere outside. I don't know. How could this be? Am I going insane? Interviewing is so stressful, yet this seems very strange, and it scares me a little. The sound dissipates as I'm called into the meeting. All goes well, and I'm home by early afternoon. The sun filters through the Japanese paper and bamboo shades in my apartment. The viney plants silhouetted in the sunlight. I decide it's a good time to meditate, and see if I can focus on this sad cry to discover its meaning. I sit in my favorite meditation chair and settle in a comfortable, relaxed position. I breathe slowly, comfortably, relaxed, peaceful, quiet, focus the light. I hear the cry. It's far away, but growing a little louder. In the dark of my closed eyes, I see a grayness clearing into a scene in a waking dream. I'm standing in an arena of light gray concrete. In front of me is a curved wall of arched entryways. I drew a little drawing. I don't know if you can see it. Each is dark. I don't know where they lead, and I'm alone. The only sound is the cry, which seems to be coming from the arches, from one of the arches. It's louder now, and I know the source is nearer. It's such a sad sound. I call to it, please come out, show yourself, let me help you. A moment passes and the cry quiets, and then I see something, something coming through one of the dark archways. It comes to me rolling and small in a bumpy way. It is something unimaginable yet alive in a composite way. A sad and miserable, deformed ball of a thing with eyes that look up at me with such sadness. I'm overwhelmed with the need to pick this child of misery up and cradle it in my arms. My tears flow from me. My heart aches like a mother holding a sickly child, and I want to comfort it and apologize as I realize this is my child. A child made of my misery and my self-condemnation over many years of accepting defeat and miserable beliefs about myself. This is my own creation, a homunculus of self-loathing. Sorry, I've never read this out before. As I hold the creature, I can feel it unfold under the flood of my tears. Here is the knee I scarred when I tried to run away from home when I was a child, thinking I was unloved. Here is the bumpy scarred back from being flogged with a stick. Here is the big ugly nose and the buck teeth and the ratty knotted hair and slouching, fearful shoulders. And more, and I cried again for the many things I saved and built a person out of, and miserable memory and belittling beliefs. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I say. I love you no matter what, and I will care for you now that I know what I've done. And the sad eyes looked up at me and melted into my aching heart. As I came back out of the meditation and into the soft noon light, I felt my face wet with tears as I opened my eyes to the awareness of this incredible journey of discovery, understanding how I had created such a sorrowful thing to hold onto my misery for so long. It was good to finally meet my child of such fear and self-loathing and be given the blessed chance to give comfort and love to the deepest part of my own self. I no longer hear the cry. All right, so I guess that was a story about things we can love when we figure it out. All right, so, and I apologize. It was pretty intense for me too, and I don't know, I just had to read it. All right, this is the story of Taj Mahal. He was my dog. My dog was, well, this is one story. My God, there's a lot to tell about this dog, I have to tell you. And my mom, I was just talking to my mom about him, and she said, why don't you write that down? So I started it, and I think I can tell the rest of it. I can tell some of it, and then I'll see. My dog was named after the great musician Taj Mahal. It's also possible he was unknowingly named after the extraordinary edifice as well. I didn't name him. He was a stray found on campus when I was in college by a friend my friend Lynn, who had a friend who was a banjo player. And the story goes that he had a dream that he called the dog Taj Mahal, and Taj came running to him. So Taj was in his dream and he had just met him. That's so interesting because that later on figures a lot into his story with me. So Lynn thought that was a good name, so she named him Taj Mahal. And sometimes I'd call him Taj or Mr. Mahal because he was very regal. He was very beautiful German Shepherd Yellow Lab mix, and really smart and healthy and wonderful and caring. She had to go to Buffalo for a long period of time, so she asked me to watch him for a while. That stretched into a month, and one day I asked her if I could just have him to keep because I fell in love with him, and she agreed. Taj was an amazing dog. I lived off campus, near campus on a dead-end street, and he enjoyed playing with all the other dogs frisbee while we had beer barrel parties on the dead-end block. He was really good at that. One time, we were at a party indoors and my friend had her little niece, who was just a toddler there, and she came up behind him and pulled on his tail, and I was a little too far away to just run over and do something about it, and I was worried, and he turned around and just licked her in the face until she giggled and ran away. He was such a swell guy. And if I ever came home feeling like sad or lonesome, or I got not such a great grade on one of my paintings or something, I'd sit down, he'd put his head on my knee and look up at me with his big loving eyes. I'd be like, oh, I'm so sad when you got me here. So I was always cheered up by him. In the morning sometimes when I was at school, he'd go off and play on campus. We all knew that the dogs hung out around the food place, where, you know, the lunch place, and try to get scraps. And then he would find me in my art class. There was an elevator to the second floor. I think he'd get in it and come up. People would always let him in. It seemed like more people knew Taj than knew me, because they'd come up on the street and say, "Hey, hi Taj, who's this?" When we were in town, I'd have him on a leash because there were more cars. So he would always walk behind me. And then if somebody came along, he'd walk in between us until they passed, and he'd go back behind me. People would ask me, how did you get your dog to walk behind you like that when he's on a leash? Because usually you see a dog tugging away. I said, I don't know, ask him that. He's the one that's doing it. So one day on the street, a woman comes up and she goes, that was my dog. And I said, no, it's my dog. And she goes, no, don't worry. It was actually my daughter's dog, but she didn't pay any attention to it. And so he ran away. And she says, I have all his papers and his heartworm medicine, you know, which we always have for dogs. But so, you know, if you want to come, I'll give it to you. So I went to her place and she gave me his stuff. And it turned out his original name was Jericho. He's already named after two equivalent devices. What are you going to do with a dog like that? But I liked Taj Mahal, so I kept his name. She told me that he used to like music, so he'd sleep by the speakers in the house. And I knew he liked my playing because he'd always sleep down at my foot when I'd be playing my guitar, so that was kind of interesting. She said that he had a little friend, a tiny little dog, and that ran away too. So, but I never saw it. About a week later, this tiny little dog came running out and ran circles around him and kept biting him in the legs. And Taj was like, yeah, it's you. So, you know, I brought the dog home. It was like emaciated, and he was covered with flea bites, and he was a tiny little thing, so I named him Peanut. And we had these two big double sinks. So I put him in the sink and I washed him, and it was like horrifying. There was like blood flowing and old scabs, and I rolled him up in a towel afterwards, and he was so docile. And he fell asleep right in my lap, and Taj watched the whole time. So then they were buddies forever, and they'd go out and play together and come back. And one day, these really nice people came and that lived across the street, a nice young couple. They were students, but they had been married, and they lived in the house across the street. And they said, "Can we have Peanut? You know, we were wondering if he was your dog, whose dog he is." we've been hanging out with Peanut and we really like him. So I said, I don't know, ask Peanut. So they asked Peanut and Peanut went with them and everybody was happy. So Taj used to walk with me to school at night. I had this studio space in the graduate building for some reason, and even though I wasn't a graduate student yet, it was a great big space, and there was a giant double door to get into to come and go. But he'd come and he'd hang out with me for a while, then he'd get out and go wandering around. And at 4 in the morning, I'd usually finish up. He'd be back by then. Along the way, when we were going there, he'd take a bone and he'd be tossing it up in the air, dancing around, tossing it up in the air. And then it would fly under like somebody's bush on their lawn, and he'd leave it there. On the way back, he'd go get it and toss it up in the air until he went home. So one more little part of this is that one time when we finally moved to New York, we were walking down the street and this other dog came running up and jumping circles around him and biting him in the legs, and he was all happy with me. And there was another stray, and this was Cleo. We named her Cleo, and she peed all over my apartment, and it was horrible, and she ate so many of my shoes. I was like, I gotta get rid of Cleo. Sorry, Taj. She's just horrible, and she just bite all the rah, rah, rah. She was probably very badly abused, and she was excruciatingly thin. So I brought her to this vet the vet that I went to at the time believed that dogs were people. When he had this girlfriend, they believed that dogs were people. And it was the only vet my dog ever pushed to go into the doorway of. Usually you take the dog to the vet, they know it's there. They're gonna go the other way. They're gonna get a needle or a teeth clean or something, I don't know. So I go into this vet and the cats are walking around on the back behind the couches, and the dogs are all just sitting there and nobody's fighting and everybody's happy, and I'm like, dogs are people, dogs are people. So he takes a look at Cleo and says, we can, even though she doesn't have papers, we could get her to bide a week because we know people there. So I'm like, okay. He goes, but it's going to take a couple of weeks. So I bring Cleo to my mom's house because I just can't deal with it. My mom and dad take Cleo, and when I go back there a week or so later to get her, they go, we want to keep Cleo. I'm like, Cleo's crazy. Why do you want to keep her? She goes, no, she's all sweet now. We love her. And I picked Cleo up, and all she did was lick me in the face, and she was so happy. And I was like, love conquers all. So they kept Cleo. And that's the story. There's even more to that story, but it's too sad, so I'm going to leave it at the happy part. So we'll go there and tell more dog stories.